this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about how to interact with the Jupyter Notebook with some more subtle details, particularly the idea of editing and executing in order, so like some sort of sequential pattern. So you can type all of your code within one cell, you execute that cell, and then you can move on to the next one. Sometimes you type stuff in one cell, you execute it. You type stuff in another cell and you execute it. Then you might type stuff in a third cell and execute it. That last cell may reference the other two. This is called sequential operations or sequential editing, just like a sequence, things in order. But with Jupyter Notebooks, because they are interactive, you can edit and execute stuff out of order, not sequentially. So you could edit something here and execute it, edit something here and execute it, edit something here and execute it, but then go back earlier and change things, but then you have to execute stuff after that. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So most of you, or all of you, should have a notebook. It's called Cells and Sequential Instructions. You'll notice that mine has the title for video editing. Yours will not. Yours should have your name prepended to it. So let's get into that right now. If you haven't already, you may want to read through the notebook first. You may even try some of it and then follow along with the video and so on. Okay. So just a reminder, these are cells. This whole environment right here is called the Jupyter Notebook cell. This one is a text cell. So I'm going to read some of this to you. You can skip this if you've already read it yourself. Computer programs work by running one instruction after another. It's very important to write your code and programs keeping this in mind so that all your instructions are in the right order. The Jupyter Notebook or Colab environment is interactive. That means while all the code in a cell gets executed sequentially, if you're moving around between cells, you might accidentally get things out of order. And I say this as someone who has gotten things out of order. So we're going to look at some examples of how you want to do this correctly, but then how you might accidentally make mistakes and it might work incorrectly for you. Now, I realize we're doing this before I've even taught you real Python or much Python. And so because you haven't had a full introduction to Python syntax, we're just going to work with a few basic concepts. So you'll hear me refer to assignment. This is when we assign values to variables. So in this case, x equals 10, the value of 10 is assigned to the value of x. And then wherever in our code we use x, Python interprets it as the number 10. The print function does not send the code to the printer, although back in the day, 40, 50 years ago, it did. What this does is it prints it on the screen. So if I type print and then in parentheses, I've got the quotes, hello there, you'll see hello there. And I could type print x and you would get the value of x. You can use either single quotes or double quotes here, and we'll do more of that in the next lecture. So in one cell, you can have multiple Python commands. You can have x equals 10, print x, and it all happens at once when you execute that cell. And I just want to emphasize that when I'm printing out the variable, I don't have quotes around it. If I was to print x with little quotes around it, I would just have the letter x appear on the screen. And with basic Python, we have some really simple math functions available to us: addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. And so with our examples, I may ask you to, let's say, add 10 plus 20 and assign those values to x. And then x would have the value of 30. From the previous, one of our previous lessons, you know how to execute these cells. You can do Shift Enter. You can do Control Enter. You could go to the little play button that appears on the side of some of these. And so in some of these cells where you're going to type code, I will have the little hashtag your work here, and then you'll enter your work underneath it. Okay, so let's go through this. We'll go through some of the basics, in other words, doing things correctly. So I want you to go to the next cell, and in that code cell, type x equals 10, and then run that cell. So this is all a text cell. I just want to emphasize this is how I typed everything. Shift Enter, sorry. And now down here in this cell, I'm going to type x equals 10, and then I'm going to execute that cell. And I'm going to use Shift Enter when I do these. Shift Enter runs the cell and advances to the next cell. You can do Control Enter, or you could press the little play button, but I'll do Shift Enter. It's the first time I'm running anything in this, any Python, and so it takes a second, but then I get x equals 10. Now, we don't see anything on the screen because we haven't printed anything, and so now we want to print the value of x to the screen. So I will do print x. And when I do this now, I'll see 10 appear. Now, instead of doing this in one cell here and then one cell here, I could put both of these in one cell. I could do x equals 10, print x. That's usually much easier if these are related commands to do it in one cell. I'll do Shift Enter, and it prints to the screen. Now, if you want to put blank lines between the commands, that is totally fine. You could do x equals 10 space print x, and it still prints on the screen here. It's up to you to think about readability of your code, both for yourself and the instructor who might be grading it. In this case, it'll be me. So really, it's up to you. You know, if you've got if you've got like 50 lines of code, you may not want that spread out with like 2 or 3 spaces between each one, because 50 lines of code is hard to read, but it's up to you. And I go back and forth depending on, I will have a bunch of commands that are similar with no spaces between them. And then when I get to a block of my code that's doing something different, I'll have some spaces. Now, I want to point out that we can reference x in later cells, even though we executed those cells earlier. So down here, I can do print x if I want to. I may even be able to do something like, print x plus 3 here. And I can still reference that variable for whatever I want to do. Okay, so with print statements, we can even do a little bit more than just printing the value of the variable. So I might do something like print the value of x is, and then the next line I could print x. And if I run that cell, I'll see the value of x is this. Now I'm going to take advantage of the interactivity of the Colab notebook. I'll go back to this. I could also do like add a blank line. And if I just do print open close parentheses, I'll get a blank line. Maybe it's hard to tell that there's a blank line here. But then I could also do stuff on one line. So let me make a new variable y. Y equals, let's say, x plus 2. And then right here, I'm going to do print the value of y is, and then I'm going to have comma after the quotes and then y. So before I run this, let me just in detail go through what I've done here. I do print quotes, the value of y is, close quote, and then comma, and then y. And then when I run this cell, I get this blank line, and I get the value of y is 12, and I get this all on one line. Now, there's a lot more that we can do with print statements, a lot more formatting that we can do. However, we'll save that for a later lecture, just because there's so much that can be done. So now we assigned the values of x and y earlier, but again, this is an interactive notebook. We can change them. You'll find even in a Python script, you can reassign the values of variables later in your code, and this can be very useful. So let me do something very different here. I'll do x equals 100. I will do y equals, let's say, 112, I guess. And then I'll make a new variable z equals x plus y. And so I've changed them, and then I can just add a print statement. I'll just show you a little bit more formatting that we can do. So I'm going to print, and I'll do x. Then I'll have comma, and I'll have a little plus with some spaces around it. And then I'll do y, comma. Notice that you need commas between each of these, whether it's like text with some quotes or a variable. And then I'll have a little equals, and then I'll have z. So x plus y equals. And I get 100 plus 112 equals 212. So again, Python allows you to change and modify the values of variables. You can even change the types of them. So I could make this into words if I wanted to set x equal to words. And we'll do a little bit of that more going forward. So that's interacting with these cells, I don't want to say in the correct way, but in a way which doesn't lead to errors. So let's look at some possible errors that you might get. The most common one, and again, it's something that I run into, is I actually forget to run a cell. So typing code, Python code into a cell doesn't necessarily run it, which means that your Python kernel or your Colab environment doesn't know about your code. In other words, it's like you've written some words on the wall, but nobody's read them out loud. So it's like, do words even have meaning if nobody reads them? Kind of like that. So in the example below, just follow what I'm asking you to do. Type some code into cell 1, but do not run the code. And then type some code in cell 2 that uses it and try to run cell 2. And we'll see that we get an error. And we'll see how to fix it. So in other words, so let's make a variable. It could be called anything. Let's call it my variable equals 100. And I am not going to run the cell. I am not going to hit Shift Enter. I'm not going to hit Control Enter. I'm not going to run this. So I've been typing, and all of a sudden, someone asks me a question, and I forget to edit it. I forget to run it. And so now I come down here, and I'm going to be like, oh, I can use my variable. I'm going to print my variable. Just type in my code, just doing my work. I go to run this, and notice that this, every time I move my mouse to it, I get that little sign, that little play button. But notice that there is nothing in those brackets, which means that I did not run it. So now I go down here, I hit Shift Enter. I got this error. Now the error might look scary, but let's try to figure out what it says. So we get a name error, traceback, a whole bunch of information about the Python input, and then it shows where the error was, line 3, line 4, line 5 in this cell. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in print my variable, and it says my variable is not defined. And that's because even though we typed my variable equals 100, we actually never ran this cell. And note that this cell here has a little 10 in it. That means it's the 10th Python command run. This one up here is blank, which means it was never run. But we can fix this error without even editing anything. And I can do Shift Enter to run that. And then I do Shift Enter to run the next one. And now I get 100 printed here. And that's because the Python kernel or the Colab environment knows about my variable, and we can use it in subsequent cells. Now, similarly, you might accidentally work out of order. So again, you're jumping around from cell to cell. Let's try to follow this example very carefully and see if we can replicate the error. And you may wind up doing this at some point. Like I said, I know that I have in the past. So let's set the value of x to be 10 in cell 1. In cell 2, we'll set y to be x plus 10, and then we'll print out the value of y. So let's go ahead and do this. I will do x equals 10. I will run the cell. Then I will do y equals x plus 10, and I run it. And then down here, I'll do print y. And we'll get the value 20. So we set x equal to 10. We set y to be x plus 10. When we print y, we get that y equals 20. Easy peasy. Now, let's go back up here and change the value of x to be 100, and then just run cell 3. So I'm going to change this value to be 100, and I'm actually going to run this cell. So now x is 100. Instead of running cell 2, suppose, again, I'm not paying attention. I just skip down to cell 3, and I'm like, oh, yeah, y is equal to x plus 10. X is now 100, so y should be 110. And I go to run this, and I'm like, wait, y is 20. No. Look at my code. I'm looking at this. X is 100, y is x plus 10, y should be 110. Now, a clue might be that these cells are 16, 14, 17. That's the order that they were run in. And so I went straight from 16 to 17, but I never reran this in the middle. So it's not like Python knows that y is equal to x plus 10. Once I do this here, it just takes the value of x plus 10 and assigns it to y. And if that sounded confusing, let me try to specify. Once x is assigned a certain value, if it does a mathematical operation like this, instead of really adding x plus 10, the first time we ran this, it added 10 plus 10. And now y is equal to 20 at that point. If x is 100, y is still 20 here. So I can just go back up here. To fix this, I can rerun the cell, and then I can rerun this one. And then I get 110. And if you're ever concerned about like running stuff out of order, you can go up to the drop-down menu to the runtime and select Run All, and that runs all of your code. So you go up to Runtime, Run All, and it just starts at the beginning. You'll see these things sometimes spinning as it goes through stuff, and it just chugs through everything, which is what it did. So it went 28, 29, 30. And then all of our cells picked up new values as it just ran stuff. You can also, if you're really concerned that you might have some old lingering variables that you erased, you can do restart runtime or factory restart runtime. I'll try this now. And then you do runtime run all. And you can make sure everything works. And then boop, 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 110 down here. Now, you can always put all the Python code in one cell, and that avoids many, many, many mistakes. But one of the real big benefits of the Colab environment is to do these checks one at a time. Just to break them up into little pieces, see if they're doing what you want, check them out, and then fix them if you want. Okay, I hope this was useful for everyone. As always, if you have questions, reach out to me or your peers. And thank you very much. Bye.